What if the person you're hardest on is you? We talk a lot about discipline, performance, and growth on this channel. But what if the next level of growth doesn't start with pushing harder? What if it starts with compassion for yourself? Today, I'm sitting down with Karin Velicka, author of the Dear Me letters, a powerful collection of letters written to her past self during some of the hardest seasons of her life. We're going to talk about self-betrayal, the stories that we tell ourselves, cultural pressure, and what it actually takes to heal, not just perform strength. If you've ever felt like you're succeeding on the outside, but wrestling with yourself on the inside, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Karin, welcome to the Self Leadership Lab. Please introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It is such an honor to be here, and I look forward to our conversation. My name is Karin Velicka. I come from Slovakia, and I have recently transformed from a high-performance job to something a little bit kinder, where I have become a life coach, and also I have written this beautiful book, Dear Me Letters. And all of my approach is based on compassion and how we can really find out the core of who we are and how we can really honor ourselves in our life.
Yeah, very interesting concept. So tell me, where did the letters start and what precipitated this in your life to make both the change in profession, but also the change in your own personal mindset?
This was actually when I was at the beginning of my healing journey. I was working with my therapist. And what was interesting is that I have found myself in a space where I was struggling to understand who I am. And the first letter was created in a way that finally my authentic voice was given a space and I allowed it to be heard. And in the way I did it was I was writing to myself. So I was in a lot of pain, a lot of confusion about who I am and why am I actually doing things to myself that are hurtful. And I just found this beautiful outlet of writing, and basically I just put all of this pain and misunderstandings and tolerance that I should not have had towards certain situations, and I put it on a page. And this letter, it was the first of 5, and I found this outlet to be very liberating in certain sense. And after 1.5 years, I decided to really give it a life and publish it out to the world.
Yeah. So what were you doing prior to that was causing you this pain and this kind of mindset that was against yourself? What were you doing then?
Before, I didn't really have these kind of conversations with myself before, because I was basically constantly performing and I was always adjusting myself based on the group that I have found myself in.
Mm.
And that is the reason why I really needed to find out the core of who I am. And before, I didn't have any outlet, basically. And finally, when I found writing, I started to understand the authentic version of myself, started to give her the space, let her to be heard. And that's how I started to regain myself again.
So to summarize, like before you had kind of outsourced your being or your soul to what you thought others wanted for you, which is kind of a lot of what I talk about on this show that like, if we're not true to ourselves, you use the word authentic self, you're actually walking around being you to some degree, but not being you on the other degree, because your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors are probably more for whatever. And you said you came from like a high stressful job or I think those were your words. Did that play into a little bit of this loss of yourself, or was it more of a social kind of, the way you interacted with the world, or was it everything?
I think it was indeed everything. And I think it's also interesting to say that I had many different masks. So the facade was not just one. I had a different kind of personality before with my family. I had a different kind of personality with my friends. And then I'm also at the job. So I was constantly molding based on what other people were expecting of me. And what is also interesting is sometimes it was not even that they expected something out of me. It was that I expected that they have certain expectations, and then I was basically people pleasing my way into life. So I was just putting all of these burdens on myself, but actually maybe people even didn't even need that of me. I just thought that I needed to be what other people like or what other people expect, and I was trying to change my personality based on that. So what was playing into it, I think it could be cultural, I think it could be societal, and also there might be a bit of peer pressure going on. But honestly, I just didn't allow myself to have that permission to figure out what I like and how I can show up in my life.
Yeah. I find it so interesting how many people have the same kind of story where they're looking at what they think other people want from them. And I know I certainly lived many, many years trying to meet other people's expectations. But you're right. I mean, you never know what they think. And chances are they probably don't even really think about you, right? They're struggling themselves, that they may be doing the same thing. So this whole process of writing, how long did it take you to really like start, removing these expectations of others and start living towards your expectations and your own desires?
To be honest, on a certain levels, I think I'm still clearing it out of my life. Like I think mainly I have already healed a lot of stuff from my life where I can hear that authentic voice. But even now, sometimes I find myself thinking, what are the expectations or how I should show up instead of really being honest to myself. So I think it's a work in progress. I don't think that it can be fixed from one day to the other, and it takes years. So I am on this journey for 4 years now, where I am really reflecting and using different tools to get to know myself. So I think it's really a relationship with yourself that you need to craft. So of course, the biggest layer, and this is when I really started to write the letters, was after half a year of intense therapy. And then I was just peeling off all of these different layers. So I imagined it like an onion. So you take off one layer, but you don't actually know how many there are in order to get to the core. So I was going one by one, layer by layer, because I mean, if I would get to the core immediately, it could be very unsettling for the person. So I had to go layer by layer. And I think I'm at the final stages where I already know who I am and I know what I wish to be, and I get to honor that. But sometimes I do find myself people pleasing, or I do find myself in a place where sometimes I choose because of what other people want me to do instead of what I really wish to create or wish to do.
Yeah, it's so difficult and so many people want it to be a switch. They want to be one way today and one way tomorrow. But, I was just listening to a speech this morning, and the guy was saying that he was talking about developing a stoic practice in your life, and that it takes, you've probably heard this before, it takes 10,000 reps, 10,000 hours, whatever 10,000 you want to put on there. And, if you did one mindset shift a day, like let's say you wanted to start liking yourself or be more living your life, and you did one a day, it would take 27, 28 years to get to that 10,000. Now obviously you can do this multiple times a day and you can accelerate it slightly, but the good point there is that any kind of change, and from someone who's done it, I'd like to hear, you know how, yeah, I know it's not overnight. And you said you're better today after 4 years. I'm on a personal journey myself. I'm on year 6, and there's still days that are harder. But what was the key that you found to keep going? Was it, writing these letters that you've then turned into a book, or was it a combination of things? I'd like to hear what you went through.
I think it was indeed a combination of things. The letters was one outlet where I could really put these emotions on paper, because before I didn't even allow myself to be angry, to even feel this embarrassment. I was always suppressing all of these feelings instead of feeling them through. But unless we feel them through, they never escape our bodies, right? So I think the first thing was to even start understanding how to be authentic with myself. And that's where compassion comes in. And I remember sitting with my therapist, and I was telling her, like, I was not really able to tell her the real story of what happened, because I was not really pretty in that story. I maybe did something, I don't even remember what it was that I was describing to her, but basically I couldn't tell her the real story because I was not perfect in that story. And when I shared this with her, she told me that it's not that I cannot accept it to tell her, but I cannot accept it and tell myself. So that was really the first step, to be radically honest with myself. And sometimes it meant that it was difficult to accept certain things. But once I stopped blaming other people and pointing the fingers towards others and started to really take the ownership of my life, that's when my relationship with myself started to change. And I think that the most important part is the compassion, because there, of course, the healing journey is not easy, it's not very quick, and we will make mistakes, even though, for example, I'm 4 years on the journey and mistakes always happen. But how can I see it as my learning and not as my identity? And how can I really own up to all of my feelings? And I think also all of the feelings, they are very valid. And I also saw in coaching that when I talk to people, they're like, how can I escape these bad emotions? And I started to understand that there are no bad emotions. They're just emotions that really are showing you something. They're mirroring something in your life. So I started to craft a relationship with all of my emotions. And once I understood that healthy anger is necessary to keep boundaries, to really tell me when somebody is crossing them, that's when also it started to shift, because I started to listen to those emotions and I started to really craft a relationship with myself. Because very often, usually, we don't have this relationship unless we create it. So I think when I was choosing whether I want to go to the event or not, I was never part of the equation. I never looked at myself and said, do I actually wish to show up there? Or is it that I'm just doing something that other people want me to? So yeah, this is somehow a long answer to your question, but I try to really capture it.
No, it's very interesting. And you said something, you said healthy anger. At first, did you find anger as a difficult emotion to deal with? Because once you start making change, you're obviously listing a lot of things you don't like about yourself. And I know I personally, in my journey, I found that I was like listing them or acknowledging them made me more angry with myself, more regretful, more, hey, you're never going to do it because you've been doing this for so long, that sort of thing. So I had to eliminate anger as much as possible. So I had to remove anything that would make me angry, right? And it was, I don't know, at the time, it was maybe a news story or some kind of, confrontation or whatever. So I kind of had to use avoidance to get over it. But I don't know if I've ever come up with like a healthy anger. So I'd like you to dig into that a little more for me, just so I can better understand it and see, because like you said, you can't avoid emotions the rest of your life. I also don't think you can rely on your emotions, because they come and go. And, once you get a grasp of it, and that's why I like the word that you said, healthy anger. So yeah, give me a little bit more on that. I'd like to hear your words on that.
That's very interesting what you're saying, because I've had the exact opposite experience. Because I was suppressing the anger all of my life, I first needed to understand how to be angry. So before I had this experience where something happened, somebody crossed my boundary, but I didn't trust my emotions. I didn't trust them, that they are valid. So I wasn't sure that I can be angry until somebody told me that I can be, or somebody allowed me that anger.
I
So
see. I see. So you were repressing it, whereas I was giving it like way too often, way too, like one of the things that started me on my journey was actually when my wife told me that she thought I was the angriest person she knew. And I'm so grateful. She doesn't, of course, like it when I tell this, but I'm so grateful to her for saying that because like you said, someone had to tell you that it was okay to use your emotion of anger to get over things. I was using it too much. And I think that's a very interesting concept that we often overlook in coaching and kind of self-help wellness kind of things is that there's an appropriate amount for everything, right? You can't go around always being like, emotionally stale because then you're just going to be a flat human being and then you're not going to live, right? You're not going to find enjoyment, you're not going to find sadness. The key is to not be in any one of those too much. And it sounds like I was too high on the anger, you were probably a little too low. And a similarity, even though it's completely different, is you allowed yourself to be a little angry and be more protective of you and the voice that you wanted to give. And I had to calm that down because it was the driver. So it's kind of interesting that we both got to the same kind of wellness journey and the desire to then help others not fall into this trap, but we got it from a different way. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things. And that's one of the things I love to emphasize on this show. My way was my way. Your way is your way. Whoever's listening to this making a change, they've got to find their way. So in that regard, how do you help people find their way now that you're doing coaching and trying to help people with what you've learned?
So for me, how I reframe it always, and what was also a big shift for me, is that when I am angry, how can I reframe it in a way that the other person can understand? Because if we lash out and if we use really high voice or very angry voice, people usually tend to shut down because they are in a protective mode. So how can we share our message to the other person in a way that they understand? And what I really found in my life to be very useful is to share my feeling and make it about me, not about them. So instead of saying, you have done this, I'm saying, I currently feel like this. So I feel hurt. And it was very tough for me to learn to speak up about my emotions because I wasn't really used to doing it. But this changed a lot. So even when I started to say, I feel very frustrated because this thing made me frustrated, or this concrete situation. And I think when we are angry and we lash out, we say, you always do this. And that's you're blaming the person in a way, and you're labeling them. You are always messy, or you're always a certain thing, and you're putting a label on the person. But if the person, we don't want to wear labels. So how can we reframe it in a way that I am angry about the situation or about the circumstance? So this situation made me feel angry or frustrated or hurt. But I try to always reframe it, not to blame the person, but talk about the circumstance in a way where we get to talk about it. So it's not me against you, but it's really the two of us solving a certain problem. And just this simple reframe, it also helps me stay grounded, that I am actually not angry perhaps towards the person, but perhaps towards the situation. And already this is a huge work, and you get to calm yourself in a certain sense, because already when you speak out your emotion, that already helps a lot.
Yeah. It's very interesting how you say you use the word you always, or this is always. I think the human brain, when we allow unchecked emotion, gets us into a state where we believe that it is truly always like this. But in reality, like you said, it's the circumstance. It's just at the moment. Now, it could be a repeated thing. Like maybe this thing is repeated over time and in your journey before you didn't say anything. So like you might think always at the time, but I think it's very healthy to realize that it's not always. And removing that from the vocabulary of when you're trying to express yourself or have a discussion with someone, positively or negatively, because nothing is always right. Other than us being alive and breathing, we're always doing that. But like the way we interact with others, but more importantly, the way we interact with ourselves. Did you find in your mental dialogue and your self-talk to yourself that you were using these "you're always X"? You know, for me, I'll give you an example. For me, it was always "you're always a failure." You're always messing up. You're always not doing enough kind of thing. Did you find something similar in your path as well?
Oh, yes. Actually, now you are talking a very good point because self-talk was also a huge shift for me. And once I started to practice to change my internal dialogue to something kinder, this is also the point where my life changed because I had to teach myself to speak to myself kindly, because I was so harsh. And for example, when something fell down on the floor, I was immediately cursing myself. I was telling myself, "You are stupid. How could you not have seen something and it fell down?" And now it's more of a joke with myself. I'm like, "Karin, how, like, please be more careful, baby, next time." So it's like very, very kind and compassionate. Sometimes I make fun of myself. So I get to play with myself and it gets to be an intimate relationship with myself. So I definitely had these kind of labels like "you're always lazy" when I tried to just rest. So I was not able to rest at all. I was always in my high achievement kind of a loop because I had these thoughts come up when I was resting, like I was constantly escaping myself, making myself busy so that I would never hear myself because then it was very negative dialogue. So yeah, I had all of these negative labels. And what is interesting is sometimes it still pops up at me, but there are new labels that I still didn't clear. And that is why I think healing, it's not a quick fix and it's never over. So it's more like, how can we create a relationship where we are compassionate, and when the things come, we just can process it in a very good and flow way instead of cursing ourselves or being harsh.
Yeah, that positive self-talk is so valuable and it's amazing. And we talked a lot about it on the show is how amazingly cruel we are to ourselves. I know I certainly was. And one of the things I had to do to get over it was start saying those things out loud. So my wife would hear it. So others around me would hear it. And they'd be like immediately, like if it was a friend of yours, you would never talk to them that way, right? But we talk to ourselves in such a weird way. And you brought up the example of just dropping something on the floor or knocking something off the counter. It's truly amazing. Like when I look back at what used to make me the angriest and send me into like a tailspin of depression, anxiety, were little things like that, like dropping a cup or spilling coffee or these sort of things. And what's really interesting about it, when you start changing your mindset and having compassion with yourself, you start eliminating those little small things. And and then it allows you to concentrate on the big things. I know you said you kind of now joke about it. Do you ever like go back and when you do this, you think like, hey, 4 years ago I would have gotten very angry and it would have ruined my whole day because I spilt this milk or whatever it was?
Oh, definitely. Actually, I started reading my old journals, and I get to reflect on all of this journey. And it's crazy the kind of coping mechanisms that the brain creates, because that is something that once was safe. And now that I get to read it, I'm really horrified what I have allowed myself, how I allowed myself to talk to myself. So it's definitely very interesting to see how we are even able to be so harsh and so critical. And I would never speak to anybody in that way. And it really changed, like once I started to change how I speak to myself, the criticism towards others has stopped as well, because everybody is a mirror. So then the world became a kinder place around me in a certain sense. So yes, I have definitely seen so many things shift just because I decided to go down this journey. So even though I have seen how difficult the journey was, I would do it all over again because it was so profound to change in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. I often reflect back and say, I'm so grateful that I got to that point because it allowed me to get to this point. And it gives me more empathy. It gives me more compassion. It gives me more awareness. Now, in my case, I'm a little sad that it took me like 40 something years to get there. But you're obviously younger, so kudos to that and starting this a little bit early. But what would you tell to people who are out there right now who are struggling and you know saying they want to make a change, but not taking the action to go and do the change? Obviously, you took action and you did it through writing. But what other recommendations do you have for people? Maybe they're not writers. Maybe they're not interested in that. Like, what would you do to help them out?
I would say that, there is so much attention on the individual, and I have noticed this in the society. We're always pointing fingers towards people, what they are doing wrong, individualistically. So when they want to make a change is such a big thing because you really have to reprogram your mind. So I would say that we sometimes even feel guilty for not starting to change. So how can you find the compassion and see how can you do small, little, consistent steps? Because we have a big vision. And I will use an example like, okay, now the new year is here. So the new me comes. So I will change all of my life. I will start going to the gym. I will now start eating healthy. And we create this big momentum, and we think that change must be loud and huge and just really a big one, but that can be very overwhelming. And what we need to do is start practicing the change. It can be small one and it can be very easy one, but we think that change must be tough because it must be big. But we can do really small, consistent steps that are going to get us where we want to go. And I have seen on my journey that at the beginning, I really had to push myself to change and work on myself. But after some time, it became not that, oh, how much I need to work on myself, but it became where can I go? Who can I become? So at the beginning, we do need to create that relationship, find that compassion, and do so in everyday life. Because the change, it cannot be overnight. We want quick fixes. And I think also the marketing around this is you can change from one day to the other. But the reality is that the change takes time, because also once we start creating a new pillar, a new life where we are becoming a better version of us, a lot of our voices come at us, and they start telling us all of these patterns, and it asks you to come back and retreat because the new is not safe because we don't know it. And I like to say that it's not even about becoming the best version, but it's about loving the worst parts of yourself. And this was the biggest shift for me as well, because we like to see, of course, I can be the best version of myself. And I have been, because I was overachiever. So I had really a good job. I had so many friends, and I was living my life in a way that everybody would say she is the best version of her. But then I didn't like myself. And what was the reason behind it? Because I didn't like the parts of me that I was suppressing. And once I started to really face myself and see those parts that I was really not allowing to be in my life, to have a voice, and once I started to integrate them, that's when my life changed. And that's what I also like to say to people in coaching, that this is not that you need to become the best or you need somebody to guide you to that version, but it's about crafting the relationship where you can love yourself in all of the circumstances.
Yeah. No, I find that liking and loving yourself is the key. And of course, obviously on the self-leadership lab, self-leadership is leading yourself. So you've got to like or love yourself. I mean, you're going to probably have to start with like. That's what I gave myself permission almost a year ago. I gave myself permission to start liking. So I had done all this work for like 5 years. I'd done a lot of work, but I still didn't like myself. And you know what? The thing that I found was I didn't like the version that I saw of myself. like we talk about living to other people's expectation, whatever external, the shell that we show every single person every day. That's what I didn't like because that wasn't who I was. And I was questioning, am I a good person? Am I a terrible person? And now today everyone wants to look at trauma and all these things to define me. Well, in my case, it's none of that. The only trauma, if you want to say, is the way I was treating myself. So for you did you find something similar that you probably liked yourself all along? You just didn't allow yourself to see it because you were playing this. I think you said it, you have all these masks. You didn't like the actors or what you were portraying. Was this very similar to you or something similar?
Exactly. And that's exactly what the letters are about, because it's this personal relationship where I really went from self-betrayal, because nobody was forcing me to not like myself, right? And it was all of the tolerance I have had towards situations because I didn't know myself. I didn't know I don't want to be there. And I didn't listen to that inner voice telling me all of these things, because we know our own truth and we know who we are and we know who we wish to be. We just sometimes create all of these blockages where we don't hear ourselves. So exactly like you were saying, it's this, we need to go to that journey to get to know ourselves and get to like that person. And once you craft the relationship, then you are basically unstoppable, because once you understand yourself, know yourself, then you automatically show up around people that are supportive, because you finally understand what are the places that you want to, where you want to show up.
Yeah. And the longer we keep keeping that out of our presence and allowing our true selves, the harder it is to find it. Over years, you operate in one way and then you shift for another, depending on what room you're in. Once you can start going into any room and being the same Bobby, the same Karin, whoever your name is, it is so freeing. And I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about taking small steps, because every coach will say it, whether you're Tony Robbins or Bobby Shelton, you're gonna say it's got to take small actions. You didn't get to where you are overnight. You can't get to where you want to go overnight either. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to not take the small actions and get more into the quick fix? Like you said, New Year's resolutions, or, I'm going to go to the gym and lose 20 pounds. And, they can't celebrate that they lost a pound this week, a pound the next week. After 20 weeks, they're going to get it. But most people, like I said, they try to lose 20 pounds right away and they end up, failing and probably gaining back more because, the shame and the self-guilt they've got. So why do you think that is in your opinion?
I believe it's because the small change is not visible. And the big change, when it's loud, people can validate it. So when you lose, as you say, 20 pounds, it's visible, people can congratulate you, and you get this validation that you probably crave. But when it is something so small and so consistent, you have to take a commitment on yourself. You have to create a commitment. And the commitment, people are, especially in the society these days, it can be something where people don't have the best relationship with commitment. Sometimes I see it also in coaching that we try to take the easy road, the quick one, but because you have to show up every single day and work on yourself. Even I have sometimes troubles to have my morning routine because emotions come into the place. So how can we regulate our emotions so that we really create the life from the place where of authenticity, basically?
Yeah. Yeah. And the commitment part and taking the easy road, I agree with you. Most people want it easy. But
Yeah.
I remind people that what got you to the place you want to change was the easy road. Like you let your standards down, you let your mind take over, the appraisal of others or whatever. In your path, have you found that you stop wanting the appraisal or the affirmations of others more, and you seek more the affirmations and acceptance of yourself?
Definitely. And I love to see that I no longer require the validation, and it really changed my life because then I I really keep my own promises. That's the first thing. And because I do, I know myself. I know when I show up somewhere, I do it from an authentic place, and there is no need for validation anymore because I do it for myself. All of my life I create for myself. I know who I am, where I wish to be. So when I show up somewhere, it's because I wish to be in that room, be in that place. And that is the reason why there is certain intentionality in my life. Nothing happens on accident, and I take myself to places where I can thrive. And because this validation is not really needed anymore, there's also, it's like once you allow validation to be in your life, you also have to accept the opposite, which is criticism. Because once you allow other people's opinion to dictate your life, then you are open to all of it. And because I no longer take criticism from other people, I no longer take also validation from them, because I know who I am and I'm so grounded in that knowing that nothing can shake it. So that's the reason why other people's opinions now do not shake me. I can take it into consideration, but it doesn't change the core of who I am.
Yeah, you've said this several times on the interview. You said that you choose to do what you're doing. You choose to be in the room that you're in. I think that's so valuable because, before you were saying how when you were, stuck a little bit, you felt guilty when you were, taking rest or, whatever. But I think as long as you make a conscious effort to say, today I'm going to rest. I've recently implemented, I take one day a week, call it a Sabbath, whatever, from the religious context, but one day a week where I limit what I do, because I don't have to be productive that day. And it's a conscious effort on my part. And I tell you what, at first that was a struggle. And then, we all have calendars and we all have things we need to do or we have to do for work or whatever. But instead of saying like, I have to go to this meeting, say, well, what can I learn from this meeting? I choose to be in this room because I choose to make an income. I choose to do whatever I'm doing at the time. But just that simple mindset shift is so valuable, because if instead of saying, well, I have to, and you say, I get to, what can I learn? What can I do? What can I observe of others? What can I observe about myself? I think it's so valuable. And the same thing goes with like any kind of change. You said it's not measurable a lot of times, or it's not like big impact. Like, losing a quarter of a pound is a lot different than losing 20. But at the same time, if you're saying I'm here for a reason, and you do notice these little changes in yourself, that should be enough fuel to keep you going. And I wish more people would do it. And like in your case, I mean, you got to it through writing these letters. So I don't want to go through the end of this, get to the end of the show, and I was just talking about what I want to talk about. Tell me a little bit, just summarize the letters for people and your book and what you hope people to get from it when they do read it.
The book is so intimate because I wrote it for myself, and I wrote it to understand the pain, the anger, the shame, the guilt, and all of these fears that I have had in my life. So that's why there is absolutely no filter. And especially in the letters, I was trying to understand the anger because it was suppressed my whole life. So it is also a very angry book. And the reason why I decided to put it out and to really share it with the world was because there might be people who have already gone through the journey and they're like resonating with it, like, oh yes, maybe I have gone through something similar, because the emotions, they're generally, we feel similar emotions, but we have unique experience. And so that people might reflect on it and see themselves in the letters. There can be also a part of the group which is that they have never been on the journey, and it can be a good perspective of what a person can feel when they go through all of this emotional turmoil. And then there's the group who probably are on the journey, who are trying to figure themselves out, and I'm hoping that they can meet themselves on the page and they can see like, I am not the only one who struggles. I can feel all of these emotions, and I am like somebody understands it and somebody sees it. And it can be a personal relationship with the book, because, when you have a coach, when you have a therapist, you need to be with them in the room and you need to justify yourself or explain yourself, or you can feel like you need to do that. But with the book, I'm trying to provide something where people can feel seen, and it can be a safe space where they get to digest the text and they get to see themselves in it. So it's a mirror. And also I say that even though it's my emotions and my letters that I wrote, I feel that the book is separate from me, and it's a product, and it's something that is maybe not the product, is also not a good word, but it's something separate, and it gets to live a life, and I am not important in that sphere in a way, because it's not about me, it's about the journey, and it's about what a person can feel, and it's about how can we really see it in a way that I can find myself in it in a certain sense.
Yeah, no, that everything about that is beautiful. And I especially like the point that you wrote it one for yourself. I mean, obviously, dear me, right? But that you want to show others that they're not alone, because I think so many people who are struggling, they think they're the only single one. And I guarantee you, we witnessed it today. You and I both were at a point in our lives where we struggled. It was different, but it was the same. The way we had to deal with it was exactly the same. It's just you had one stimulus, I had another. And knowing that people around you and opening up that conversation, I think is so valuable for our human growth. I mean, we talked about earlier, don't seek the affirmations of people. Don't seek it out to say, oh, well, if they're struggling, that makes me feel better that I'm struggling. But work with each other, and use a book like this to help you. And really, like you said, it's a mirror. It's like you're a guide to them without being in the room with them. I like that you said that too, because that's how you should kind of read these kind of books, right? Take from it what you can and see what applies to you. But beautiful, beautiful story, and I'm so glad that one, you found your path to happiness and peace and well-being, but two, you decided to put yourself out there for everyone. So kudos to you. And I know the book just came out a couple weeks ago of us taping this. So why don't you tell people how they can, both get in touch with you and find the book and all that good. And then why don't you end it off for us? Whatever, you put a bow on it, whatever your final message is for the listener. I'm going to stand out of your way and let you tell it today. So.
Thank you. And firstly, I want to also thank you for creating a safe space where I get to talk about it and share it with the world, so the book can have wings and fly in the world. And yes, so the book, I would recommend to go on my website, velickaKarin.com. So it's my surname and name, because there I provide different platforms. So it's available on Amazon, that's the main one. There's also Hugendubel, which is something for Europe. And there are several other platforms, so people can choose what they feel comfortable with. And then I also have my community, which is called Dear Me Community, where I share weekly insights or just a reflection on my life, and I get to go deeper. I provide exercises, reflection questions, so people get to meet themselves. So I provide a certain container and a mirror as well for the others. And this is on Substack. So in case somebody would be interested in this work, I also have a Substack, and then you can also find me on Instagram, where I share some videos. So this is also a format there.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes, and anything you want to put out there for people, any words of hope, any words of encouragement, whatever's on your heart right now, just share it with the world.
Okay, so what I have on my heart that I have been reflecting recently is that there is this revolution where we are really trying to figure out who we are, and there is evolution of our soul, basically. And we are going more towards compassion and kindness and seeing it as strength. And I would recommend for people who are on this journey or feel called towards it to start, even though the peers or their environment might be not understanding all of this, to just start and be the example and be the leader in change. Because once I started to heal myself, I also see that I started healing my environment, because I started to show up differently. People noticed, and people saw that there is a kinder and a more empathetic and effortless way. And once we start with ourselves, it emanates to others as well. So the world can be a kinder place if we choose to. So that would be my message to the others, to be brave, to start. Even though it might be difficult, there are people who are going to support you. There are people who have been on the journey just like us. So just allow yourself to be guided or to get yourself out of the comfort zone, because to be on the other side is something so beautiful. I would do it all over again any day, even though it was tough, it was difficult, but to be here, it's the greatest pleasure of my life.
Oh, beautiful words. Thank you for coming on. And for all of you listening, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.